So our expert for today is Grazzia Maria Mendoza Chirinos. Grazzia has 2 master's degrees, one in international education and one in TESL. She's a U.S. State Department alumna, recognized for project development for teachers' professional growth projects. She has been in the TESL field for 27 years, and that's how we've met each other. She is the founder of the Heltat TESL in Honduras, representative of Honduras in the Latin America Regional TESL Group, and member of TESL International Association Board of Directors. At present, she's an education specialist for the U.S. government at USAID Honduras. Welcome, Grazzia, and thank you for being here with us.
Thank you for having me.
So we'll start with our first introductory questions for tonight. The very first one is the big question: what is student engagement? Grazzia, the floor is yours.
Thank you. So when we talk about what student engagement is, we can look at it from different perspectives, right? And it will have to do with theory and what we do in practice, but it also has to do with our own experience. And let me tell you about my experience when it comes to how I define or what I think of student engagement. So it can be students being present in mind and body, attentive in the classroom, curious about a lesson, and yes, motivated, right? They are following what we have prepared and what we are teaching. And that is our objective as educators, right? That our students are engaged at that level. But we can also think about engagement in a different way. And I think this is the most difficult part for educators. And it is, how do we engage learners in the actual decision-making process of their learning? And this means allowing them to set rules with us, allowing them to define the content that they want to learn, what are they interested in, the ways in which they want to learn, the pace at which they want to learn, or how to evaluate their own learning and assess their own learning, right? When you look at engagement in that way, it takes a completely different perspective, right? Because learners become equal contributors to the process. And it's usually something that we teachers control, but when we allow them into this space and we allow them to be kind of at the same level as we are, then we are starting to cater to their needs and interests. When we think about that type of engagement in the online setting, it's even more important because online student engagement, it's very difficult. So if you think about the process in that way, it translates in us serving or delivering lessons that are more meaningful for our students. But it also helps us as teachers to know our learners and to be able to cater to their needs, to their interests. And like I said, that's the most difficult part to do. And because for us, it's difficult to let go.
Totally agree. That's so interesting. If anyone has anything to share, the floor is yours as well. So anyone who would like to share what student engagement is to you, would be more than happy to hear your opinions on this.
I'm just going to remind you all how to raise your hand. I know I just did, but it's been a long day. So at the bottom of your screen, you should see participants. If you click on that, it should open a window on the right-hand side. And it should give you the option to click raise hand. It's the blue. Oh, awesome. We have Natalie who'd like to raise their hand. Natalie, would you please raise your hand? Respond to the question. Feel free to unmute yourself. Oh, Natalie?
Sorry, I was just practicing.
Oh,
And
that's
just
okay.
Fine.
And you did it right. So congratulations, Natalie.
Because I was having a hard time coming in on Zoom tonight, so I wanted to make sure it was working. Sorry.
Oh, that's okay. Thank you so much for practicing. We appreciate that.
You can tell us about your experience, Natalie, with student engagement and what it is for you.
I'm actually a TESL supply teacher. So I've had the privilege of working slightly closely with a teacher who teaches teachers. And she definitely engages her students in having them participate in choosing what they want to learn, how they want to learn. I'm not sure about the evaluation, but they definitely have an input. In fact, they chose last time a subject that she didn't expect them to choose. Yeah, they chose banking, and she created some fabulous. It's only a level 2, and she created some amazing things for a level 2 group to do.
Great. That sounds like
Oh,
a great experience.
So interesting. Very
Yeah.
good. Anyone else before we move on to our next question? Matt raised his hand.
Please go ahead, Matt.
Yes, it's more of just an observation. Like, I try to sometimes get my students engaged online and ask them if they want to add to the agenda, what we're learning and those kinds of things. And, you know, what would you like to do next, and those kinds of things. And I'd be curious tonight to talk about how we can get students to feel comfortable to be involved, because I find some of them they often sit back and they're used to the role of the teacher being in charge, and it's like, just tell me what to do. And I kind of get that a lot. It's like, no, you're the teacher, just tell me what to do. So how can we change that, right?
Yeah.
So that would be just a comment for tonight. So.
That's a good comment, and I think a good question, Matt. And I think something that has worked for me when that happens, because that's common and that's usual. And for example, in Honduras, our context, it is very common that students are more pleasant with just receiving information instead of producing information, right? And what has worked for me is assigning roles. First, getting to know your students, right? And learn about what their strengths are, what are the things that they do really well, and what are the things that they are capable of doing. And based on that information that you learn from them, be able to assign roles, different things for them to do in the classroom to keep them engaged. And that allows you to maintain them productively engaged in what you're doing in the classroom, but also attentive to what you want them to be attentive to. So assigning roles for me has been an experience. Also creating collaborative lessons, doing a lot of things as teams, and also within the teams, assigning them roles. And what I like to do when I assign roles is I shift those roles. They're not the same roles all the time, because I want them to have different positions or different roles at different times. And that helps a lot and makes them feel productive, but also makes them feel responsible. So I have actually something to do in the lesson or contribute to the classroom as a whole. So it gives them something to be responsible for. So in my experience, that has helped a lot.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Grazzia.
Thank you. And that actually leads us to our second question, which is actually focused on how does student engagement look like in face-to-face contexts, and how does this vary in a virtual or remote learning environment? And I guess we all need to hear.
Exactly. So there are many studies out there, right, about what works, what doesn't work. And I read one from Butts, Hydern, and Mosier, that they run a very small study with a small group of students to see how things work, and if students found a difference between doing work face-to-face or doing things online. And in their results, they found that there was a little bit of difference, but for them, it didn't really make a difference how they did it, as long as the plan was well designed and well structured. So if you think about it, both contexts have advantages and disadvantages. So you can have a face-to-face context which is not engaging at all, even if you are face-to-face. And you can have an online context that is very engaging. And the key here is how you plan your lesson and how you tailor your lesson so that everybody is active and everybody is productive and everybody has something to do based on what you want them to learn. And I think keeping them on task in different ways through different settings. For example, when I do face-to-face engagement, I like, yes, we do a little bit of my introduction, a little bit of my lecture, and that usually lasts from 5 to 10 minutes. But then we go into hands-on work. And I like to do corners or gallery walks, or I like to do different stations, learning stations. And in the different learning stations, we're doing different activities. Now, there are some things from that face-to-face context that you can transfer to the online context by using, for example, breakout rooms. And you can do circles, conversation circles in breakout rooms, and then they come back and report out. You can use the breakout rooms with a Google Doc or with a Google slide, and then they're interacting with the document live, and then you present the document. So there's that level of responsibility of the students that they have to be on task and working on something that they then have to report on, and everybody can see that. So that means that they need to do a good job, because everybody will see that in the end, and it's their reputation on the line, right? So I think the key is the way that we design our lesson to make sure that everybody is on task at all times. And as I said before, building on those strengths and then creating areas of opportunity for growth.
Okay, we have one person with their hand up. I see Analia. Analia, I know you had your hand up for the last question. Did you want to answer this question as well?
Oh, hi, thank you. Actually, I wanted to share experience with the first question.
Yes, please.
And it's kind of like an addition to what Grazzia said. I've been teaching online because of the pandemic since March, and then I had summer online school. And I found out that it's very engaging for the students to assign them to tasks. Like, for example, I would assign them, like, if we have a subject like bedrooms or kitchen, I'll assign them group 1, you go find me forks, knives. This is at lower levels. Or find some subjects around the house, or find some like items. So it like really engage them in online, so they don't sit only on the chair, but they move, and that's like, you know, like provides better learning, I think.
Interesting, very interesting.
I agree.
Thank you so much, Analia.
Thank you.
We're gonna go on now to Natalie.
I'm relatively new to teaching online, and I'm just, as a supply teacher, I know how to put the students into a breakout room, but because I cannot send the material to them ahead of time, does the Google Slides, like say for example, I have a conversation that I'd love them to practice in twos in breakout rooms, but I'm not able to send them the dialogue ahead of time. Does the Google Slides, does that allow you to show them what you want in a breakout room?
Yes. So what you do is,
what I'm asking?
Yeah. So what you do is you share your link from your Google Slides with them on the chat. They can then open it and then use it in their breakout rooms as conversations. One way that I have done this is...
Sorry, say this, share link
on the chat.
The chat. Okay.
And then they open it in their own computers. And then one strategy that I have used, going back to that part about students having roles, is that one of them has to open the Google slide and be the note taker. The other people are going to, one person is going to be reading the questions or reading the case study or reading the dialogue. And then another person has to report back to the classroom. For example, if it were a group of 3, or they can be also in groups of 5. But using that, everybody is on task, and they have to choose the person who's going to be the spokesperson. And that we usually ask them to do that at the beginning, but in my experience, that usually happens at the end. And they usually choose the person who spoke the most during the conversation, right? And then what we need to do is make sure we keep track of who has been the reporter, so that they don't repeat that in the next part of the lesson, right? And so that we make sure that everybody participates.
Okay, excellent. Thank you.
That was a great question, Natalie. I'm going to take notes on that and use that too. Okay, thank you so much. We're going to move on now to Susanna. Susanna.
Yeah, my question.
Hi.
Hello, sorry, it took me some time to unmute myself. My question is about the Google Slides that they are talking about and the Google Talk. We are not familiar with it. Maybe if you can just give us an idea about how we can access that Google Slides and Google Talk.
So you would need to have a Gmail account. right? And when you have your Gmail account, that allows you to create Google Docs or Google Slides. And Google Docs and Google Slides are like a Word document or like a PowerPoint, but it is meant to be collaborative. That means that anybody that has the link to that particular document or that particular PowerPoint is going to be able to add information or edit information. It can also be used only to view information. It really depends on what you are thinking about when you're designing your lesson. So the main thing is to have your Gmail account, and from that, you're going to get access to those two tools.
Only the instructor needs the Gmail account. The students do not have to have the Gmail account. Is that correct?
It's not necessarily that they don't necessarily need to have the access to a Gmail account, because when you produce the link, you can produce that link and give editing rights or viewing rights. And you determine how you want that link to be used.
Thank you. Thank you. Sounds interesting. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, that was awesome. I think we all learned a little bit more about Google, and Google has so many awesome tools too. So I think it was a great question. Thank you, Susanna. Let's go on now to Mustafa.
Yes, I would like to add something about planning, especially for increasing online student engagement. So one thing comes to mind, I think, is that to increase online student engagement is to present clear, organized learning materials. And this way we can reduce student confusion. And also students should know how far they have come and how far they need to go, especially when you just teach online. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for that comment.
Thank you, Mustafa. I want to go to the chat quickly before we go back to the people with their hands up. And I see you. Don't worry, I'm not forgetting about you. But Bei Zhang in the chat said, my students' levels are really low. Sometimes it is very challenging to engage them because they don't really understand much, especially when it comes to interacting online. Grazzia, do you have any suggestions or ideas? Actually, anybody here, because we are all in ELT professionals, right? Do we have any suggestions or ideas about how to do this?
Yeah. So in my experience with beginners, and when I was working with in an agricultural university, and we used to get students from rural areas who were true beginners. So their level of English was limited to vocabulary like table, window, door, right? And the purpose of them learning English at our university was that they, in their senior year, 3 years from the beginning of their university, they would go to an internship at an English-speaking country. It could be the United States, the UK, but it could be anywhere in the world where English is spoken in order to learn. So what we did, and what I did with them, is because I needed to get them to a high intermediate level or even an advanced level, and we only had 3 hours of classes a week, it was a very difficult task for me. So what I did is I started with very simple phrases, very simple instructions, very simple ideas. And the same can be done in an online environment. You start with simple phrases, simple ideas, very specific, very concrete, and that will help them become familiar with the language. And then you start increasing the level of difficulty, right? And it is okay for them, if possible, if you are in a context where they all share the same native language, for them to use their native language at times. That's not a bad thing. It can be used to learn and contrast and compare the language that they are learning. So resorting to their native language is not a bad thing to do.
Lovely. Definitely true. Yeah. I know you have lots of comments, but we have lots of questions as well to discuss tonight. So let's move on to another interesting issue, which is, from your point of view as a participant or student, what things make you feel engaged? Grazzia?
So when I think of myself as a participant in a webinar or a participant or as a student in an online class, I like to be in an environment, and I liked how Colleen said it, in an environment that is safe for me, where I can interact when I want to interact and when I comment when I want to comment, where I can leave my camera on if I feel comfortable or leave it off if I'm uncomfortable, whether I can speak or just comment in the chat. So I think making sure that we take into account that level of flexibility with our students makes for engagement. And that's, in my personal case, how I feel more engaged, if I'm allowed to have that safe space.
I totally feel that, 100%. I'd like to now invite Marian. And please, if I pronounce anyone's name wrong, please do correct me.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Great, great. Okay. I'm teaching adults, 5, 6 level, and I have found, Grazzia, that the breakout rooms really, really work well. Sometimes I don't give them enough time in the breakout rooms, but usually the material that they're covered, they discuss and so on. But then sometimes I will interject into the breakout rooms, and I see that they are talking sometimes about personal items, which I think is just fine. They have developed certain relationships with each other, and sometimes someone will have a problem not being able to get onto Zoom, and they have their phone numbers and they'll phone each other. So not only is it a teaching experience, because we're in these hard times, they are starting to develop relationship and friendships, which I think is absolutely fabulous. So thank you for mentioning that.
Definitely. Thank you for that comment.
That was a feel-good comment. Thank you so much, Marian. I loved it. Okay, let's go on now to Natalie, please.
Mine are it's just a quick comment. I'm sure all of you know YouTube has been an absolute godsend for me in teaching and knowing how to use Zoom as a teaching tool. So even they also have great things on Google Slides, Google Docs, how to even just figure them out. So I just encourage that. And just not a plug, but ESL Library is absolutely spectacular as far as literacy goes. I haven't had to teach long-term on literacy, but I have done a couple of classes, and they have a digital platform now, really easy, engages the students, and highly recommend it for all levels, but literacy. They've got some great stuff on fruit, vegetable, colors, everything.
Thank you.
And grammar.
Thank you. I find testimonials the biggest indication that I need something, especially if it's for somebody that I trust. So Natalie, thank you. Okay, Marisa has a comment in the chat box, or sorry, it's a comment and a question. Marisa says, does anyone have a good way to track who has spoken and who hasn't? It's very hard with a large class, giving everyone a chance to speak.
Yeah. So what I like to do is I like to use a code of honor. And what I do is I let the students track their own speaking. And at the very beginning, I set this rule that we are basing our relationship in a code of honor. And the reason that they are in my classroom is because they want to learn and improve their English skills. And that they are going to be responsible to determining whether they are doing the speaking that they need to do. And so we create a chart and they can mark there. And this has been very effective. I have not had any student lie about their work or what they have been doing. So for me, it has proven effective basing that relationship in a code of honor and letting them do their own tracking. And that helps me and it helps them. It's also helping them self-regulate, right? And self-assess their work.
Okay, Grazzia. Yeah, I've tried different things. Just recently what I did is I put a number in front of their name. And so I had, number 1 ask number 2. So at least they went in some kind of order. And that way, I'm hoping everybody gets a chance that way. But I find just like in the classroom, and even more so now online, the really shy and students lacking self-confidence, this is a great place to hide, right? Yes. So in the classroom, you know who the chatty ones are, and they're always participating. And then the other ones, they just kind of, they like to be quiet and just observe, which is fine too. Yeah. But, I find even online, it's even more so because now you can turn off your camera, you can turn off your microphone. So some of them are just, and sometimes I call on them and they're not even there, like, hello. It's a little tricky to really engage them at all times,
Yeah. But giving them different options. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So, okay. Well, I'm going to try that, the code of honor thing, see if that works.
Thank you. Let's go on to Mustafa. He's been waiting very patiently.
Doreen as well. Yeah.
Yeah, Doreen as well. It's Mustafa, then Matt, then Doreen. That's the order. And then we'll move on after that.
I want to feel engaged as an online learner. There are 4 things that are important to me. The first thing is I would like the instructor to frequently review learning outcome, because I believe that if students know why they are doing an activity, they're more likely to invest themselves in it and complete their work, which is what the instructor wants us to do. And the second thing is I would like the instructor to increase their presence, especially in online. Students feel connected to instructors this way, and I think that one thing that the instructor can do is, for example, set regular scheduled office hour. So this way, a student knows that whenever he has a question, he can just ask the instructor the question he has in mind. And the third thing is, which I think is very important, especially in an ESL context, because students may feel kind of, I don't know, like they may not feel at home, right? So it's building a learning community, which is not very easy, I guess. So why is it important? Because if the instructor can build a learning community, students should feel a sense of belonging, which is one of the important foundations of learning, of course. And the last thing for me as an online learner, I think I would like the instructor to provide regular feedback, because this way I feel valued, right? I think that, well, the instructor just pays attention to me. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Great comments.
Thank you.
Great. Perfect comments. Yes.
One thing I wanted to say about feeling engaged, especially online, is we're often like, and we're teaching like 3-hour classes, sometimes 3.5 hours, and or at least I am, and and this I think applies to face-to-face, and I like when teachers try to apply this online, is to change, you try and fully utilize what Zoom has to offer, and change the types of activities that you're doing fairly regularly. Like, I don't, like every kind of 30-40 minutes, like, so use the breakout rooms, or use the whiteboard and have them actually teach them how to write on the whiteboard, so they can actually physically contribute that way. They're not just passively sitting looking at the screen, they're actively using their keyboard. And then I also just recently started using the polling function in Zoom, which is really cool, because they can submit, and then you can share the results, and they see what everyone else answered and that kind of thing. And then just vary from a speaking activity to then other things I've done too is like share your screen and use an online quiz where you can type the answer in on the website kind of thing, and then it'll show you what the result was, like that kind of stuff. Or, you know, so it's kind of being interactive and changing things up like every 30-40 minutes to keep people on their toes, as opposed to, you know, kind of like fall asleep.
So. Exactly. And another good tool from Zoom is the annotate tool. So you can use and it has hearts, and it has check marks, and it has lines and everything. And you put up your slide, and it can have questions, and you can have them place the heart where you think the correct answer is. That allows also for a lot of interaction. Yeah. And that's a very fun tool in Zoom.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Grazzia.
Be patient, be flexible. And like I was saying, give them little bits of information that you feel they can digest, and then start increasing those expectations and that level of difficulty. So start simple, start at the basics, and then start moving along and tell them. And like Mustafa was saying, explain to them, this is the outcome, this is the expectation, I would like you to do this. And if they are engaged in that process and they understand what is expected from them, they're going to be doing that work. When we have used in the classroom technological tools, when we have been in face-to-face settings, and especially now online, what I do is I explain it to them, but I also create tutorials, similar to what Colleen did at the beginning. So she had those slides, and she was explaining, this is for the audio, this is for the video, and have that explain it verbally, but also have that tutorial so that they can refer to those and look back on them and study them. Yeah.
Okay, Loretta, please.
Let's move on.
Yeah, let's move on.
This is a very nice organic
It
conversation. I love it.
That's lovely. And that's what we'll be having, conversation questions. That's why we're here, right? A lovely place to be. Okay, so what are the strategies that can fit into different contexts related to engagement? And we already touched some of those contexts, right? But now we're asking you to think about beyond the technological approach to virtual learning. So I'll have Grazzia first and then the rest of you.
Thank you. So when you consider technology, we have many things out there, right? There's an overwhelming amount of websites, tools, apps. You have YouTube, like Natalia was mentioning. You have your apps like Mentimeter, Flipgrid, Nearpod, Padlet that allowed you for students to be engaged, but that's all connected to that virtual context. And those are great tools and they can facilitate your work either face-to-face or in an online setting. But what if there is no efficient technology where your learners are? And for example, in Honduras, that's the case. We have learners in rural, very remote areas that sometimes they don't even have electricity. And during these times of the health crisis, what we have done is engage them in different ways. And we have used WhatsApp. We have used Facebook. We have had teachers go to their homes and deliver materials for them to work and then return to their schools. We have had teachers bring their materials through with the school meals, a little workbook for them to do work and then also return to them. We have had lessons through TV. We have had lessons through radio. So there are many ways and we need to be really creative when it comes to engaging our learners so that it's not only sitting in front of the computer. And Natalia was saying this very clearly when she said, I asked them to, or no, Analia, I think was saying that I asked them to bring me something from the kitchen or something from the bedroom. And when I think about young learners, for example, and in this situation, and we were talking about this at the beginning, is they have to sit in front of the computer for hours and hours, and that's not very healthy. So if I'm teaching young learners or I'm teaching, for example, the parts of the plant, why not plant a little bean seed and see the process of that little bean seed growing and then report to the class and do things that go beyond technology that keep them engaged in that learning and keep them engaged in that content. Also create galleries, visual galleries. They can not be connected. They create their own visuals. They draw their pictures. And then when it comes the time for that 20-minute session, present their gallery. So they're doing things away from the computer, not necessarily connected to the computer. So it's important to focus on things that are not only technological, but think about those contexts where technology is not available, but you still need to be delivering lessons to those learners.
Okay, thank you. Anyone?
Mustafa has his hand up. Please, Mustafa.
Yes, I just want to add something about the previous question. I think Margarita asked the question, if I'm not, or maybe, I'm not sure, but there was a question about, yeah, sorry about that. There was a question about the introduction of the LMS. I think the first important thing when we teach online is to introduce the learning management system, because students should know how to find assignments, how to find materials and assessments. And also they should know how to communicate with the instructor and classmates. So instructor, for example, can give tips on time management. They can help students with goal setting, and also they can help them with planning. So that's, I think, the first step to introduce how the LMS works. Yeah.
Thank you, Mustafa. That's an excellent point.
You're welcome.
I don't see anyone else with their hand up just yet, but Susanna and Grazzia are having an awesome conversation. Susanna said, Grazzia mentioned some apps and sites really quickly, and Grazzia was kind enough to list them out. So Grazzia mentioned Mentimeter, Flipgrid, Nearpod, and Padlet. If anybody here is interested in learning more about any of these apps, please let us know, and perhaps our next TESL dialogue can be about some of these topics.
For sure. Okay.
Oh, sorry, Susanna, did you hear me? I could say it again. It's written actually right above where you wrote, Susanna, but it's Mentimeter, Flipgrid, Nearpod, and Padlet. Do you see it, Susanna? You could just let us know in the chat if you saw
Yes,
them,
I
okay?
did.
Oh,
I
okay,
did. Thank you.
okay,
Thank you.
awesome. No
Yes.
problem.
And the good thing about these apps is that they are very intuitive. They are very easy. It's like signing up and creating an email, and they're very easy to use because they have very clear instructions. So they're
Right.
very easy.
First time only, and
Yeah.
then it becomes easy. Good. So let's move on to our next question. What is the connection between engagement and your curriculum? And that's a very important one.
That
Grazzia?
is a very important question because your curriculums needs to spark the interest of your students, and it has to be genuine interest, right? It should be relevant and it should be meaningful to them. And you know that our curriculums are dictated by our ministries of education or by our institutions or by our higher education councils. So, but what we need to make sure is that we make that meaningful for our students. Yes, we have a curriculum that we need to abide to, but how do we become creative and make sure that our learners are engaged with this curriculum, ensuring that they are having interaction, that they are having collaboration, that they are at levels of concretion or levels of abstraction, that we are making sure that we're introducing reflective thinking, but we are also introducing that romantic thinking that has to do with the emotions, right? Because it's not only about the intellect. We need to bring also the emotions into place because we are human beings. And we need to make sure that stories, anecdotes, case studies, real life experiences are part of that curriculum. And finally, of course, that very philosophical, in Spanish we say astral, that it's like beyond our cognitive mind. How do we make sure that we engage all those types of thinking in their learning and make sure there is that connection with them as human beings so that they can see the relevance? Why is this useful to me and how will I use it in the future? And will it be relevant my whole life or only for the test, right? We need to measure those differences there.
Anyone who has anything to share? Mustafa. Yes.
Sorry, I was muted. Please, Mustafa, go ahead.
Yeah, I was muted too. I just unmuted that. Yeah, I want to add two things or maybe three things. One is deliver spaced learning. So I think it's very important, especially today. Students are not, in mood for long learning. So one thing we can do as instructors is to deliver spaced learning, like in small chunks. And I say that because I did some research and I learned that neuroscience has proven that attention span is 10 minutes. It's too short, right? So a little bit disappointing for us as instructors, So if this is true, which is true because based on science, I think we as instructors can chunk content into 10-minute segments. I remember that Grazzia talked about using WhatsApp, for example, or I don't know, Facebook or any of these things. So one good thing about this kind of application is that we can just chunk content into 10-minute segments, right? Like giving them some lessons in the app and then they can go home and do it and then just send it to the instructor. So the other thing is we can give them the opportunity to recall and review, which is very important for them. And we can also use different formats to keep students engaged, like, for example, videos, I don't know, visual text, or just different formats that we can use to keep them more engaged, not to make lessons boring. And the next thing is we can let students take action on what they have learned. This is very important. Maybe in the past, when we go back to, I don't know, 40 years ago, which was like a grammar translation method, it was all just memorizing things. But today, the focus is and should be on students taking action, because this way they feel, wow, I learned something and I can just do it in my social life. Like, for example, writing essays, right? Or, I don't know, asking open-ended questions, or just give them some projects to do at home, especially if there is no technology, for example. So they can just keep busy at home doing something real life.
Exactly.
Yeah, and one last thing I want to add is about the use of art. If we use art, this is of course one of the webinars I just saw recently, and the instructor was focusing on the use of arts in ESL teaching, which is great actually, like drawing, very simple thing, like every one of us like that for sure. Yeah, that's it, thank you.
Yeah, art, drama, right? Using drama.
Yeah, drama is perfect.
Yeah, readers' theater to make sure that they are following a script and developing that script. presenting that script. Yes, great comment.
Next we have Analia. Analia, please go ahead. Analia, don't forget to press the unmute button.
Hi, do you hear me?
Hi, we can hear you.
Oh, sorry, it took me a while. It took me a while to find the button. Okay, anyhow, I just want to share how I just generally keep them engaged. Like, it is very important to make them like feel that they're involved and there is something it's going to happen, something interesting. So I like to say, for example, tomorrow we're going to have a field trip to the aquarium, for example, but it's like it is a virtual trip. So I don't know if you're familiar, but many websites like Toronto Zoo, Replay Aquarium of Toronto, even some of the American zoos, they open because of the pandemic virtual tours. And this is how we go. I share the link and together we go, and they're so excited to see everything they share, like we learn new vocabulary. In more importantly, in some of the websites, like for example the Replay Aquarium of Toronto, they have field trips, questionnaires and quizzes and worksheets, which are available as a PDF format. So I use them with my lower level students, like level 1 and 2. And it's like a ready lesson for us, which I found like very, very engaging for them. And they talk after that with their students and their families that they've been to the aquarium to no traveling, even no spending money on subway. So this is one innovative way with like coping with this pandemic, because when we're in class, we have the opportunity to take them to the subway, to take them to the park, to take them to different places. But generally speaking, we can do that online too. With your phone and Zoom and share your videos, you can take them anywhere.
Thank you, Analia. That is great.
Exactly.
Yeah. Thank you.
Bringing your curriculum to the community. That's
right.
Bringing
exactly.
them. Exactly. Perfect. Excellent.
Susanna, I see you've clicked yes. I'm not sure if I missed you earlier. Please let us know.
No, that's fine. I have already the answer from Grazzia. Thank you.
Oh, okay, no problem. So let's go on to Sharon then.
Hi there. I'm hoping you can hear me.
We can hear you.
Perfect. My voice is a little funny, so bear with me. So just to add a couple of things, when we were fully online, we did it by Zoom. And when you were talking about having guest speakers, I actually brought guest speakers into our Zoom meetings.
Right.
And they were talking about volunteer. One was an example, talking about volunteering, and they were talking about different areas they can volunteer. So it was not only to give information, but it was to have that sense of community, and it led them to another service that they could possibly tie into in volunteering. So yeah, we had guest speakers come in. But one thing I do a lot when I was doing the Zoom, I had literacy as well as a lower level like 1 and 2. We would actually put maps on the screen, and each of our students would actually tell directions. So I'd have this car on my screen, and they would have to tell me turn left at the lights, turn right, and I would follow it along on the map. And they had to tell me directions, and then they would do the same, telling other students the directions. So I made what was normally just a PowerPoint display on your screen, I made it interactive. They had to tell each other what to do. And you could do the same thing with Guess Who. As an example, we were working with colors, and I had a Guess Who game on there of different people with different color shirts, different color hair, different color glasses. And each person had to say, you know, is your person a boy? Is your person a girl? Is your person wearing red shirt? Or is your person wearing a blue shirt? So taking what is normally just a plain old PowerPoint from Word, making it interactive. And then the students would share. And I think the one with the map, I think we did that for like 4 days because they just loved it. Like, they loved it. It built their confidence too, right? Because Then we were talking about, because I put church on there, I put the church, a grocery store, the banks, the Tim Hortons, a gas station. So you had to give directions from the school to the hospital to the gas station. So there was all these words that they had to learn, but they were giving it in sentences. So like I said, I think we did it for about 4 days. So just taking a normal PowerPoint and making it more interactive.
Right. So it's how you use the tools, right?
Yeah.
That's the key. Do we have anyone else, or are we
Hold
ready
on
for our next question?
1 second. I think ready for our next question. I just want to highlight in the chat, Allison shared a really nice link. So Allison said there's some great ideas for ways to play games in virtual classes. A great way to add some engagement. There's a link there. So if you haven't been checking on the chat, you may want to look at the chat just to see that link for a good resource.
Great. Thank you, Allison. Now we'll talk about assessment.
Yeah.
So how does engagement look when you have to assess learning?
And that's the difficult part, right?
Mm-hmm.
How do we assess learning and keep our students engaged in that assessment? So as I was saying at the beginning, if we give them a chance to contribute to how they're going to be assessed in their learning, that gives us a good, they're buying, and that helps us to make that assessment more effective. But also remember that what we already know about assessment, and that assessment is the way in which we monitor the progress of our students. We want to find out how much they have learned and what are the things that we want to reinforce. It's not a tool for us to find out what they don't know. So if we have that idea clear in our minds, we're going to build assessments that contain tasks that are relevant, that are significant to them, that if they're listening tasks that require active listening, that require reflection, that require critical thinking, that require the input of the student into the task, that are empathic too. Assessment that has that level of empathy and that leads to autonomy, but also is able to bring collaboration together. And it should involve all those higher order thinking skills, especially creating, empowering students, and understanding how they learn. If we are capable of creating those types of assessments, our students will definitely be engaged in those assessments and will definitely look forward to them, because it's going to help them understand how much they have learned and also understand how much they need to work more in a specific area. And it's useful for us as well.
Sure. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Anyone would like to add here? Colleen?
As of right now, not yet, but I'm crossing my fingers. Somebody might want to.
Engagement and assessment. Nice combination here.
I think it's a difficult combination. And perhaps that's why some of us don't have much to say about it.
That's true. Yeah.
Something I do is, for example, I let my students take assessments in pairs sometimes and in groups. That helps them learn from others. So it's not only about the individual traditional assessment, but different ways to approach assessing and learning in the classroom. So allowing for that variety also when it comes to assessment, it's really helpful to engage them.
Mm-hmm. Grazzia, what do you think about, I've been hearing a lot of discussion lately, two kind of different fields of thinking. The first field of thinking is trust your students. You have another option, trust them. The second field of thinking is, but why should I trust them? What if they're not doing something right? Then if I let them advance to the next level, it's my fault because I wasn't being held accountable. So what do you think about this idea of trusting students versus, are they cheating? How do I stop this idea?
Yeah, it goes back to what I mentioned at the beginning about that code of honor. And if you established, and that worked for me in higher education. With young learners, it's kind of different, but when we're working in higher education, it's more common that they might play some tricks on you. Mm-hmm. But yeah, so, and especially at the university where I was working, students were used to like going around the sites, and I created this code of honor from the beginning. And I said, I know you're here because you want to learn. So everything you do that benefits your learning, it's on you. I will facilitate this process to the best of my abilities and make sure I focus on your needs and your interest and what the language will be helpful for. But you have to do the work in certain things, and we have to create this code of honor where and create this level of trust where you're not going to lie to me. And it worked. I had students that sometimes they worked very hard because the system at this university was a system where they worked half of the day and they went to classes half of the day, and every week they would switch. Sometimes they would work in the morning and go to class in the afternoon. When that happened, students were particularly very tired, and sometimes they fell asleep and didn't go to class or were late to class. And I allowed them to tell me, Gracia, sorry, I fell asleep, but I will make up the work. Or I am late because I fell asleep. I was very tired. And so we created that level of trust. So it comes to that code of honor. And we should, if we create that environment, I think learners are going to be honest and they're going to be truthful. And it's part of values, right?
Yes.
If we are very restrictive, if we are too prescriptive, then we create, students are doing things because they have to, not because they want to, right? And that's where the difference lies.
Thank you. That's inspiring. As a student, I often do fall asleep, so you made me feel a lot better, Grazzia. Thank you. We have two amazing questions in the chat box. The first question, or more of a request, is Susanna is wondering if you can give us a specific example. Earlier, you mentioned that you did partner assessment and group assessment, and maybe also an individual assessment. If you can give us a small example of each, that could be really helpful online.
Yeah, so what I have done is that I create stations for learning, and this work both in the face-to-face setting and in the virtual context. And the stations are for specific skills or for specific content of the classroom. And at each station or each breakout room that we create, what we do is we have a handout that they have to fill out. And each part has a specific instruction of what they need to do. And they go into, they read the case study, for example, and they answer 2 questions. They go to and they do this as a group. And what I tell them is you need to make sure that everybody participates, and there has to be somebody that monitors that. And that is an assessment that happens usually towards the end of the course and not at the beginning, because at the beginning I have to get to know them and know who has certain skills and who has certain abilities. Once that I know them and that I know which areas are more difficult for some and for others, that's when I pair them up and use their peers to build on the skills of the others and learn from each other. So it is a process. It's not something that you do at the very beginning, right? You need to know them before you get into those kinds of assessments. Yeah.
Thank you, Grazzia. Now we're going to go into the second question that's in the chat box. Jennifer says, how about typing skills versus handwriting? For some students, they struggle with keyboarding. One workaround is for students to take a photo of their handwritten work and share that. And that's a really good point here, right? So I guess this person is mentioning a really good point and also giving a great comment. And I think it's also level specific too, right? Because what level are they at? Should they be learning keyboarding? Should we not be putting that on them yet? Interesting.
Exactly. And that's a good comment. And it comes back to what we were saying, right? How do we make sure that they are comfortable in the way that they're going to be engaged?
Definitely. And Jennifer also gives another comment. Engagement comes from having a flipped classroom at times. That's interesting. Flipped classroom.
Yep.
All right. I think that's all that we have. Let me just double check that no one else has their hands up. Yeah. So Loretta, we can move on now.
Great. So let's continue. What types of engagement strategies are related to specific production activities in the classroom, such as presentations or group projects? Grazzia?
Yeah, something that I like to do and that I use a lot is that task-based or project-based approach to learning. And I like to do that because it actually creates for them a project where they come together as a team, not as a group, as a team, where everybody has to be involved, not rely on what one person in the group does, but be a team and work together on something that they need to solve. It can be, for example, an environmental issue in their community, or it can be the need for recycling in a certain area, or it can be a political issue that needs to be addressed, and they come up with ideas on how to solve that. Doing that through a task-based or project-based approach makes it real for them, and it gives them that meaningfulness of why I am learning English. Oh, this is the reason I am learning English. English will be useful for me because I will use it when I go to my community, and I will use it to solve problems, and I will use it to pose solutions, and I will use it to inform others. So those kinds of projects, I think, for production activities have been, in my experience, the most useful.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing.
Just
Task-based
looking,
learning.
just looking in participants, I don't see anyone with their hands up yet. A gentle reminder that if you'd like to post a comment or question in the chat box, we're more than open to that.
Great. Jennifer
Okay.
Burns.
Yes, hi. I've had a lot of technical issues. Sorry for going in and out. I just want to say about, as you were just on your last point there, what worked really well for me, I'm an EAP teacher. We did something about the United Nations, and for self-study, people had to break off into teams and learn about different parts of the UN, UNICEF, or the WHO. Anyway, there were 6 different parts, food and agriculture, and so forth. And then after doing some research into each part of the UN, we came back and we tried to solve, the global issue of the pandemic from each part of the UN. And they were really engaged with that because my class is so international, actually. It worked. It was very effective. So yeah,
that's good.
Thank you, Jennifer. That's fantastic. Would anyone else like to comment, question, type out?
To participants?
Yeah, and building on what Jennifer was saying, the university I used to work for, we had students from all over Latin America, and people seem to think that all Latin Americans, we are the same. Everybody, because we all speak Spanish, we're all the same. And that's not true. We're incredibly different. And having them sometimes present about their typical foods or their traditions or their customs, that created such an enriching environment. And it goes to that building community that Mustafa was saying, right? We are getting to know each other, learning from each other, understanding that we are not the same, even though people sometimes want to think that we are the same thing. And we have so differences in the way that we say some words in Spanish to mean the same thing. Like girlfriend or boyfriend in Honduras would be novio, but in Chile it would be pololo, polola, right? And it's a completely different thing, and it's the same language, right? So bringing those experiences to the classroom creates that level of engagement and that level of richness. So, and it can be done in online format too.
And that makes it fun. I mean, that's the biggest thing, right? That I would want to learn how to say girlfriend and boyfriend different languages because I'm very nosy. So that's helpful. Okay, let's go on to Marisa.
Yes, I just have a question about the effectiveness of the way to assess people in a group. What I've done in the past, I've put them in the breakout rooms and had them practice, say, a little conversation that we had practiced together. And then I've tried going into each room and then assessing them there. But I find it takes so long to go from one room to another. And then I'm always worried that, to try to keep the others engaged, right? It's kind of hard to know. So then what I've tried is to get them to, practice and then come back to the room. And I've written all their names down to make sure that I know who's working with who, and then get them to do it in front of the class on the main Zoom page. Is that what you are doing? Is that what you recommend, or how do you?
So I use worksheets, and I divide the worksheet. I adapted the worksheet, and I don't remember right now where I adapted it from, but it was from a note-taking strategy, and I adapted the worksheet to have different sections in which students will have to fill out information. So while the activity is collaborative, everybody has to individually write their own reflection or their own idea in the worksheet. and then they hand that worksheet to me. Like somebody was saying, take a photo of that worksheet and send it to me. And that's the way I assess that if they are doing the work individually, because the worksheets cannot be the same. Even though they're in the group, it has to have their same idea, their different ideas. It's the same topic, they're having the same discussion, but their ideas in the end in that worksheet will be reflected differently. And I tell them that when they go into the assessment, I say each brain processes information differently, and we'll have that written in that document differently. So they know that I want different answers or different reflections coming from, and because I know them, right? Like I said, this is not an assessment that I would use at the beginning. It would be as part of an ending process.
So you would get them to fill out these forms, like according to say A speaker, B speaker, and C speaker.
Yeah, and I have samples of those that I can share with Loretta so that she can share with everybody else.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Matt also agrees and says that he has had the same issue. So thanks for sharing that, Matt. And thank you so much, Marisa. Okay, there's a question in the chat. Jennifer says, anyone have good ideas about transitioning between activities on Zoom? I find it so clunky. I am thinking of ways of having students do more in between.
So Matt expressed very good ideas. He mentioned polls. He mentioned using slides to fill out information, using the breakout rooms. We mentioned the annotate. So I think when we are designing the lesson in Zoom, you have to make sure that you use everything judiciously and not abuse breakout rooms, for example, because that can be tiring too, right? So we cannot go to the extremes. But if you design, for example, a poll at the beginning to test out the waters, make a diagnostic, then you use Google Slides in another part, then you go to a breakout room, then you use your annotate tool and you vary that within a lesson, then that's going to be a little bit more interactive and it's not going to be tiring for the students because you are varying your activities there. And what I do is I practice beforehand. So I use my children, my older children as as guinea pigs, and I get them into the Zoom room with me and I practice it with them because I need to be ready doing this when I'm with the students and not make a mistake, right? So I do have my rehearsals prior to the lesson.
Yeah. Marisa said something, I love it. Marisa says, yes, variety is the spice of life. Totally. Anyone else want to add anything? Oh, Natalie says, can you explain using polls a little bit more?
So polls have to be created beforehand, right? And uploaded to the system. And then you have to make them available. Usually the host, you as a host have the ability to make those available for them. And the fun thing about using the polls is that you can show it to them and they can see not individual responses, but in general, what the feeling about a content is or what the opinions about people are. So you need to do those ahead of time and plan them in your lesson ahead of time.
I actually just created a poll. Would anyone like to see what it looks like? Would that be okay, Loretta and Grazzia?
Yes, that's perfect.
Okay, so I just created a poll here in Zoom, and I think that's what the question was directed at. So as a teacher or the moderator, you have to click the poll button at the bottom of your screen, and then you have to click launch polling. And when I do that, you'll all see it on your screen. So I'm going to click it now, okay? Do you all see the poll now?
Yeah.
It says launch polling. So you have to select only one answer. And right now, as the teacher or as the moderator, I can see who's voting. So right now, red is winning, orange is in second place, and it's moving constantly because you're all voting, right? And I can see the total number of people who are voting. So far, 73% of people have voted. For the sake of time, I'm going to stop the poll now. So I'm going to click end polling, and I can also share the results with all of you. So now we can all see together. The most popular color was blue because 40% of people liked it. And then it was red because 27% of people liked it, orange at 20, and yellow at 13. So that's just a really quick demo of what you can do with Zoom, right? You can use polls for lots of different things, gather opinions, to verify knowledge, to get new ideas of what students want to do in your classroom, lots of stuff.
Yeah. So I think, Colleen, they want you to explain how you created it because I think not everybody has them. Marisa was saying not all of the administrators have given us this function.
Permission, yes.
Yeah.
Sorry, Grazzia, if you want to explain, that's perfectly fine too.
No, go ahead.
No,
Go
okay.
ahead.
Yeah, that's a great point. You have to have access to the back end or the settings of Zoom. So once you create this event in Zoom, if you go to that event, if you scroll to the bottom, there's a place where you can edit polls. It'll say polls and there'll be a little blue edit to the right-hand side. If you click on edit, it'll allow you to put in the polls. But again, you have to have access to the back end of Zoom. If you don't, you will not be able to put polls in. So I suggest you speak to your administrator or whoever it is that runs the poll, the Zoom account, so that you can let them know about this option and why you should be using it.
Thank you, Colleen.
No problem.
And Grazzia, and thank you for the amazing questions. And here we have our next one. What available tools can support engagement in varied ways without falling into repetition or boredom quickly? So we talked about it a bit, but I know there's more to endeavor here.
So there are many technological apps, and like we were saying, if you're using Zoom, you need to be able to use all the variety of things that it has to offer, but also bring other things into the picture, and also the apps. But also when I'm thinking about engagement through different ways or tools without falling into boredom, I also want to think about bringing real life situations to the classroom, reflective practices, bringing trends, bringing the news, music, like Mustafa was saying, bringing art, bringing drama, bringing all those different topics of interest to the learners. If you're teaching English for a specific purpose, use the discipline, right, to bring that into the classroom so that it is meaningful. If you are considering that your learners need English because they need to be able to function socially, bring those activities into the classroom so that they use the language in a relevant, meaningful way. That way you're catering to your learners' interests and making sure also that you make them responsible to bring a topic. Something that I have done in my classroom is I tell them, so we make a list of topics and one person in the classroom is going to be responsible for each topic and they're going to bring it, they're going to introduce it in a very creative way. Everybody has to study the topic so that we can have a discussion about that topic. So similar to what we're doing right now, right? Having a dialogue around a topic and we all prepare for it and then we have this conversation. That creates engagement.
It does. It really does. Thank you.
I just want to go back to the chat box. There's a couple of people asking questions about polls. If in your own Zoom account you don't see the poll option, that's because the setting is not on. So you have to talk to your administrator. On your end, there may be nothing that you can do. Someone just made an awesome suggestion in the chat box. If you don't have access to Zoom polls, that's okay. You can use an app called Poll Everywhere or Kahoot. I mean, we all know so many. There's so many apps, but if you type in free poll generator in Google, you'll find these. But the two that I can suggest are Poll Everywhere and Kahoot. I will type them in the chat box. But let's go on to people who would like to engage with us. So far, I don't see anybody with their hands up, but I'll check the chat.
Yeah. Mentimeter helps you with polls too.
Yeah, that's a great one too. Okay. Yeah, because we actually talked a lot about these different ways, right?
Variety.
So we somehow answered this question.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's great because we have two more great issues to discuss. And so we could move on to this amazing question, which we all loved here. What does engagement look like from the lens of self-care and well-being?
So it is very important, right, to consider when we are creating tasks that consider the feelings and the emotions of our learners. Also tasks that do not generate frustration, like some people were concerned. I have beginner students, they have limited vocabulary, they have limited use of the language. What kind of sessions or lessons can I create? So make sure that we create things that do not generate frustration. Let them resort back to their native language if possible. If you have a classroom where that's possible, let them do that. It shouldn't be a problem. Carol Dweck talks about how do we build on the intrinsic motivation of learners, right? We create incentives all over us, but how do we cater to that intrinsic motivation so that they are part of this process? Also we said this at the beginning, establish clear expectations. These are the outcomes. I expect this from you. This is the level of trust I have in you. This is my code of honor. And then facilitate the process to get there. Inspire. bring out the potential in your learners. And I invite you to watch, if you haven't, the Butterfly Circus, sorry. It's a documentary. It's like 22 minutes from with Nick Vujicic, and he discusses precisely engaging people due to their potential. And it's a great, and I think I have the link here, and I want to share it so that if you haven't watched it, that you can.
The Butterfly Circus.
Yeah, the Butterfly Circus. It's really inspiring, and it talks about how can we focus in the potential of people and not in the negative aspects, right? Because as humans, we have the tendency to focus on the negative, but how do we do this in a way that we're focusing on bringing out the potential of our learners? I think that should be that part of self-care and well-being, especially right now, right? In the situations that we don't know what our learners are going through. People in their families might be ill, and we need to be able to address those needs. Ourselves, we could be ill, right? How do we provide self-care? And remember that if we don't take care of ourselves and our well-being, we are not able to take care of our learners. So we need to take that into consideration.
Thank you so much, Grazzia. I just want to remind everyone, you don't have to raise your hand to answer. You can post your questions or your comments in the chat box. You can even just give us a thumbs up to let us know that you like what we're talking about. But we really do encourage you. This is a safe space. If you'd like to turn on your camera, please do. If you don't want to, you don't have to. We really want to just provide, oh, thank you, Marisa, thumbs up back. We really just want to provide a space for ELT professionals to come together and talk about these topics, right? So thank you all so much for being here.
Caring for each other, right? And for our students. Yeah, great. Anyone who would like to share anything before we move on to our last question? Because 8:30 is on the corner, right?
Yeah, it really is close. I don't see any hands up right now, but
Okay.
Grazzia, I do have a really small question. I've seen some people talking about teacher well-being and saying that teachers have to be careful to draw a line somewhere. My question is, where do we draw that line? How do we know?
Well, when we feel that our energy is low and that we need to disconnect, we should disconnect, and we should not feel bad about that. And we should be able to express that to our students. We should do that when we are face to face, and in this situation, even more. I have sometimes gone into the classroom and I have told my students, you know, today I feel a little bit sick. So I'm not going to be my usual very joyful, smiley self. So please bear with me because I'm not feeling very well. So being honest about that and letting them see that you are a human being and that sometimes you need to disconnect too, I think it's a good thing and creates that level of community too and that level of trust, because then they can come to you and tell you the same thing, right? And you are going to be able to help them as well.
Thank you. That's a great response. Okay, checking the participants one more time. I don't see anyone with their hands up. I'll do a last call in the chat box. If you want to ask a question or write a comment, please do so. But I think, Loretta, I'll give it over to you.
Okay, so let's move on to our closing questions. So how do you feel now about engagement in different contexts? What are your plans regarding designing actions to maintain engagement in your classroom? So now the floor is to all our audience. Please share your ideas and your feelings about engagement in different contexts.
Matt, please.
Yeah.
Well, I just wanted to thank everyone for all their comments. I found it really helpful. There were two things that stood out for me that I'm going to try and actively start doing a little bit more. One, I really liked Grazzia's idea about making sure that students have a role. And in terms of, explain whatever activity we're working on, we're going to say, okay, in this particular thing, someone's going to be X, then Y, then Z, so they feel like they're kind of actively included. I think that's a really great idea. So I'm going to try and do that some more. And also try and bring focus not just on the technology. I really liked the idea about including things, ideas outside the technology, real life stories, case studies, or things, example things that we can bring into the online environment from the real world and get, like, so people are still, activated in the real world, like, where, like, I feel sometimes we're just staring at this screen, so the more that we can make it real. I really thought that they were two good suggestions. So thank you.
I agree. We can go on to Natalie now.
First of all, I just want to say thank you so much. This has been just really, really helpful. I'm really glad I participated in this tonight. I've picked up a lot of suggestions. I'm definitely going to look into the Google Slides and how to bring that out in the breakout rooms. I've never thought of having the students share the whiteboard. So that's a great suggestion. The annotation Zoom, and I'm going to see if I have access to the polls.
Yeah.
So yeah, so great, a lot of great suggestions. Thank you so much. And Colleen, all of you have been awesome and just really great moderator. Thank you.
So sweet. Thank you, everybody.
And thanks, Garcia. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Correct. Thank you.
Thank you for being here on a Saturday evening. This speaks volumes about your commitment and your passion, and I appreciate that. Really.
Yeah, I think us all being here on a Saturday evening, I mean, we deserve double the PD. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
That's a lot.
Exactly.
For an hour and a half,
joking.
right?
Yeah.
92 minutes long.
I just want to read Corinne's comment in the chat box. Corinne says, fabulous dialogue. Thank you, everyone. Great ideas and wonderful perspectives were shared on how to engage our learners. Thanks for that comment, Corinne. Marisa also a comment here. She says, yes, very helpful. I'm excited about trying some of these suggestions. Thank you so much. Susanna says, you guys were a great example of how to have an engaging and interesting session. Oh, there's some Spanish in here. You guys ready? Yeah. Muchas gracias, Grazzia. Okay?
Yeah, muy bien.
Yeah. Oh gosh. Yeah, thank you all so much. I just want to see if anyone else has their hand up before. Oh, okay, sorry. Mustafa has his hand up. I'm sorry. Please go ahead.
Yeah, just one last thing. I think for our well-being and our students' well-being, we should all make time for fun, for us and for our learners.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
I agree. And there are many things out there. There's you can find it on Facebook. There's a global playing brigade that is led by Yuri Wong, and they have it's sort of entertainment, but also learning and sharing, and it's kind of in a game. They do it in a game style way. So that's the Learning Brigade, and that's a very good group. There are also many Facebook groups where you can engage and create that sense of community. And today here there are 20 of us. We could create a community of support and to engage and to also help ourselves in our well-being. So take that opportunity and take advantage of this group that has so many ideas.
I found a link to the Facebook and I just put it in the chat if anybody wants to see. It's www.facebook.com/thelearningbrigade. So thank you for that, Grazzia.
Thank you,
That's awesome. Fantastic. Let's go back and see if anyone else has their hand up. No, I don't think so. Oh, that's great. Loretta, I think, do we have one more question? Or was that the last question?
That was our last question.
Our last question.
About the plans that we have for the future, but yeah.
Before we leave, I have a small idea. Do we want to use the whiteboard and write down some of our ideas for student engagement? I think that might be a fun activity for us to do so we can all remember what it is that we mentioned, maybe. So let me pull up that whiteboard.
So go on share screen when you're a host, right?
Yep. All right, so please be nice with my keyboarding skills, but you know, maybe we could just put in the chat or say out loud, what are some things that we can do for student engagement? We mentioned a lot of polls, so using polls We mentioned in Zoom, Poll Everywhere, Kahoot. I'm sure there are tons more, but that's just one of them that we mentioned.
Mentimeter.
Yes, Mentimeter, thank you.
Oh,
Mentimeter is a great one.
Thank you, Sharon. Thank you so much. Sharon says she has to go.
No worries. We only have 3 minutes left, so I totally
yeah.
get that. Maybe we could just put 2 or 3 more, then we'll move on. Group or partner assessments, which was awesome.
Corinne says variety.
Yes. I want to also add in there what Mustafa said. Change the activity every 10 minutes. I like that. Thank you. Maybe just one more before we go.
I guess using the whiteboard and the annotate Zoom, like just using all sorts of variations. I guess that's variety.
Yes.
Yes.
If we actually want to try using annotations right now, right now I'm using the whiteboard. If you lovely people go to the more, I think at the top of your screen or bottom of your screen, and then there should be the option to annotate.
It says view options.
Yes.
Oh, view options. Okay.
At the top.
And annotate. Oh, great.
Yeah, click on annotate.
And then you can actually also draw on my whiteboard. Yeah, there we go. Great. Yes, awesome. Yeah, so now we have group work going on. We're all learning together. We're all participating, and all of a sudden you woke up. Awesome.
Okay.
Yeah, and Corinne has a good one. She says, include your student's voice.
Yeah. I love that. Let me add that in. That's important. Yep, sorry if I wrote over someone's words. I'm sorry. Okay. All right. With that, it's 8:28. I think it's about time that we start wrapping up.
Yes. So I just want to say thank you for being here on a Saturday evening. You are champions. And I think that your students are very happy with you. And I encourage you to continue being as passionate, dedicated, and commitment as you are. I hope one day to meet you face to face and that we can share more together. Thank you. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Grazzia, and thank you, everybody. Colleen?
Loretta, can you just share the last slide with Grazzia's contact info?
Oh, yes. That's the last one. Yeah. Thank you for reminding me.
No problem.
Screen sharing. Yes. So this is Grazzia's contact information, her email address, and her LinkedIn profile. So you can look for Grazzia and find her there. Colleen will also share on our chat box her link for her LinkedIn profile.